I say in the book, when I walked in that room, I knew 15 of the other 16 Republicans were running for president. I mean, I know Marco Rubio, I know John Kasich, I knew, Jeb Bush. I'd met them all. The only one I'd never met was Donald Trump. So I was kind of curious. And I say in the book, when I walked in that room, I did not like him. I did not like his persona. I thought he was kind of a blowhard. I thought his run for presidency was a publicity stunt, frankly. And we spent about an hour and 20 minutes with him, and I walked out with stars in my eyes.
I'm Dave Rubin, and this is the Rubin Report. Quick reminder to subscribe and make sure that you get notified of our videos. Why not, right? Okay, joining me today is an author, economist, and former advisor to President Trump, Steve Moore. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you here. We're going to have to talk somewhat quick because you're in a major time crunch here. So
it's an honor to be on the show.
I'm thrilled to have you here. This is going to be a little quicker than my average show, so I usually do
rapid fire. Right?
I do a little backstory. Usually, I try to find out where people are from and all sorts of stuff. We're going to do that next time I sit down with you. Let's go right into economics. Okay. As a Wall Street Journal guy and a longtime economist, and you studied at George Mason and all of this stuff, how would you say your, what would you say your economic principles are? Let's just do 101. More economics.
Well, I believe in freedom and free markets. I believe that, as Thomas Jefferson said, that government which governs least governs best, and, get the government for the most part out of the way of the economy and it'll do just fine. That's not to say we shouldn't have regulation. We should certainly have we want clean air and clean water and, safe workplaces. We want a tax system that raises the revenue the government needs, but in a way that is non-confiscatory. Are you listening, Elizabeth Warren? And
we'll talk about her in a little bit.
It doesn't distort the economy. So I've been a flat tax guy for all my life. I love the idea. Let's just have a really low rate. Everybody pays it. You make 10 times more money than I do. I pay. You pay 10 times more tax and not 50 times more tax, and get rid of all the loopholes in the tax system. So I believe the free enterprise system is the goose that lays the golden eggs.
All right, so I'm basically with you on all of that, but let's do the flat tax for a second. So I would be basically for something like 15% for everybody. Would you do something to help the people that are at the lowest?
Yes.
So a certain amount of people would pay nothing.
Yeah, so like in the standard flat tax plan, you said 15%, I'd love that, but most plans are about 18%. And then you basically say for a family of four, roughly your first, say, $30,000 earned is tax-free. And then, above that amount, you pay a tax. So, people below the poverty line are not paying any federal income tax. And I think most people regard that as fair and equitable and very pro-growth, and we'd love to see it. The reason it doesn't happen is not even because, liberals oppose it, it's the special interest groups in Washington. Do you think they want a flat tax?
Right.
The lobbyists make money buying and selling favors in the tax code. If you have a flat tax, what do they have to sell?
No more favors.
If you really want to drain the swamp, go to a flat tax.
Would you do anything on the really high side of that? So right now, you mentioned Elizabeth
Warren.
Well, you got
a 19%.
Is there something you would do just to kind of, even if it didn't work sort of economically in your mind, just to kind of throw the progressives a bone?
I get it. I get asked that question a lot. You know why I don't like that? Because, you say, well, why don't we just have 20% for the really rich? And then Elizabeth Warren says, well, not 25, why not 30? Why not? We had tax rates at one point in this country, 91%. So I don't like that idea because I think it perverts I love the idea everybody pays the same rate. No, the idea, but we're just going to have a surcharge on the Bill Gates and the Warren Buffetts of the world. They will pay their tax. When they earn their money, they will pay it. And by the way, those are people who employ, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of workers. They pay tax. So I want to retain the virtue and simplicity of one rate system.
Right. Those guys are also always for raising taxes, and yet they don't voluntarily pay more.
Isn't that interesting?
What do you make of that? The mind of someone like that?
There's a group called the Patriotic Millionaires. There's something like 100 millionaires and billionaires who've signed something saying, we want to pay more tax. I call them the hypocritical millionaires because, there's nothing to prevent somebody. At the bottom line of your tax form is if you want to pay more money into the Treasury, you can write a check. And none of them do that. So my feeling is that they want other people to pay more tax, but they don't want to pay more themselves. And then they say, well, but the tax system isn't voluntary. And I'm like, wait a minute. People voluntarily want to serve. People sign up for the military. Mm-hmm. Those are patriotic people. They care about our country, and they're willing to give their potentially their life for our country. But these quote patriotic millionaires won't pay more tax themselves, but they want other people to pay more tax.
Does it become one of those odd things where it's like the CEO of Walmart or something will publicly say that he's for a $15 minimum wage, where he knows actually it won't ultimately hurt him, but it'll hurt all of the small businesses that won't be able to afford it. He'll be able to afford it.
Oh, yeah. You know, that's why a lot of the regulations in Washington that, you know, liberals want, they are able to team up with the big companies, because the big companies can absorb the cost of, you know, requiring a company to pay health care benefits or education benefits or raise their minimum wage. So it's a way actually of strengthening the big guys and strangling the small guys who are trying to, you know, compete with the big guys. So, you know, the small businesses are the ones who get hurt the most by those kinds of regulations.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned in relation to tax that you can, even if you threw somebody a bone, that it's never enough kind of, which reminds me of the $15 minimum wage thing where Rashida Tlaib said, well, why not $20? And then it's like, well, Bernie or Warren or the rest of them, they have nothing to really stand on to say why it should be 15 and not 20, because once you artificially put these numbers in.
I'm for the highest wages Americans can possibly get.
So how do you ensure that then without doing too much government?
Well, you don't have to have the government. First of all, one of the principles, you asked me about principle of economics, one good principle is you never want the government setting prices or setting wages. That's supposed to be done by the free enterprise system, the law of supply and demand. And when you have the government come in and set, you know, I'll give you, as an aside, you were living here in Los Angeles. You know, in a lot of cities, you have rent control, you know, to try to make housing more affordable for poor people. Look, we all want people to have shelter and a roof over their head, but it turns out, you know, this is a perfect example of the law of unintended consequences. It turns out when you actually impose rent control, you actually reduce the amount of affordable housing, and you actually have more people homeless, not less. And New York City found that, and yet liberals seem to never, understand that message. And it's the same thing, you know, with what were you asking me about the?
Well, the minimum wage.
Yeah, the minimum wage.
It's not hinged to reality, sort of. So once someone says it should be 15, well, then why not 20? And then why not 25?
And so what tends to happen when you raise the minimum wage is you actually, the people who tend to get hurt the most are the people with the least skilled, because you essentially price them out of the market. You know, I always tell the story, you know, I have 2 teenage sons. I love them to death, but I'd never pay them $15 an hour, right? I mean, they just, you know, they don't have the training and skills to warrant a $15 an hour wage. Why not, you know, especially for young people, let them work for $7 or $8 an hour and gain the skills. You know, I remember very well, by the way, my first job. I think most people listening to this, watching the show, remember do you remember the first job you ever had?
I do.
Got a paycheck? What was that?
I was a paper boy.
Paper boy. Okay.
I was a paper boy.
I was working in a small warehouse in Northbrook, Illinois, and you know, but you learn a lot with your first job: how to show up on time, how to be nice to your boss, how to learn some skills. So you learn that, you know, whether you're delivering newspapers or whether you're, you know, working in a factory. So I don't like that about, you know, I like that letting the wages rise, and that's happened under Trump, by the way. We've gotten a really nice wage gains under Trump through the free enterprise system and creating a very tight labor market. I mean, workers have a lot of bargaining power right now.
So you advised Trump on the tax cuts a couple of years ago. Talk to me just a little bit about, like, what's that like when you're sitting in a room with this guy? Like, what are his guiding principles, sort of economically, what you've kind of laid out there?
So,
I mean, he's obviously a capitalist.
Do you know Trump?
I've never met him personally.
So he's a really good guy. I mean, believe it or not, I always say half jokingly, you know, that he's most politicians are wonderful people in public and jerks in private. Trump can be a jerk in public, but he is a wonderful person in private. I like him a lot. He's interesting. He's charming. He's attentive to what you're saying. He looks at you straight in the eye, and he wants to know, and he'll combat you if you say something. You know, I like that. He'll joust with you if he doesn't agree with your position, which you know, he'll have 4 or 5 people in the room and they'll argue, and that's what a good CEO should do, not just surround themselves with yes men, but people who will argue out the point.
So when you guys sat down and he's going, I want to cut taxes, and this is one of the things I promised, and now help me pull this thing together.
So I'll give you one
like?
example. So this tells you a lot about the tax bill, but it also tells you about Donald Trump. So I remember we went into Trump. This was Larry Kudlow, and Larry's now the chief economist, and we said, hey, you know, we showed him this chart that had, you know, the U.S. tax rate on our businesses was 40%, and the rest of the world was like on average about 20%. And we said, this is a problem for us. As Larry called it, it's a 20% head start for all the countries we're competing with because they've got a lower penalty that they face. And as a result of that, companies were leaving the United States and they were going to Ireland, or they were going to Canada, or they're going to Mexico. This was called inversions, where companies were giving up their American citizenship to move somewhere else. So anyway, we said to Trump, we think you should have a 20% rate in your tax plan. And I'll never forget, he sat back and he said, no, I'm not going to do that. We said, well, why? He said, I want 15%. And what was so interesting about that was that from that moment until we passed the bill in late December of 2017, he always insisted on 15%. When he was in a meeting with Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan or any public declaration, 15, 15, 15. And I'll never forget, we're waiting for the final vote in the Senate because we needed to get 50 votes in the Senate to pass this. We're nervous about whether we could do this. Remember, on Obamacare, we came up with 49 votes, one vote short. So we didn't want to come up with 49 again. And so we're very nervous. We're waiting for McConnell to come back from his come to Jesus moment, when they had their final meeting in the Senate Republican caucus to see if they had 50 votes. And I remember he walks in, goes right up to the president. He said, Mr. President, I'm so sorry I failed you. I know you wanted that 15% tax rate, and I made every argument I possibly could. And, I failed you, Mr. President. What can I say? I just couldn't convince my colleagues. I said, I couldn't get you that 15%. He said, would you take 20%? Well, Trump, like, yeah, I'll take that in a minute. And I really believe this, the really interesting thing about that story is I always thank you, God, that Donald Trump didn't listen to Larry and I. He does understand the art of the deal. I think he wanted 20% all along, but you understand, if you want to end up at 20%, that's not your opening bid, right? So he started at 15, and I guarantee you, if he had started at 20% like Larry and I had, we would have ended up at about 27 or 28%. It's because he started at 15, the negotiated position was 20. Well, we ended up actually at 21%.
Do you think basically that is his secret sauce to everything? I mean, we could even take this outside of the world of economics, just that negotiating like that is basically, that is his greatest skill, period.
Well, you know the name of his book, right?
The Art of the Deal.
The Art of the Deal. Yeah. Right. He's a good negotiator. He is. I've seen him many times in person, and he knows how to negotiate. That's what's made him successful in business. And, look, he's made mistakes as president. I'm not an apologist for Trump. I like, where we are with the economy. But, yeah, I think this is one of his assets. He's a very good negotiator.
So where are we exactly right now with the economy?
Good.
Because depending on who you listen to,
well, first of all, let me say this. I mean, if I had told you 3 years ago that, after, say, 3 years of Trump, not quite 3, but we would have the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, the lowest inflation rate in 50 years, the lowest interest rates in 50 years, and the biggest wage gains in 30 years, that's a pretty darn good economy. And that's what we have right now. We have 7.1 million surplus jobs in the United States. Think about this. That's never happened before in the history of our country. 7.1 million unfilled jobs. That's larger than the entire population of the state of Indiana. That's how many surplus jobs. What that means is workers have bargaining power. It goes back to what we were saying before. So, you don't like your job working for Joe's, you can go down the, street and work for Susan. She's going to give you a higher offer. We just had negotiations between the UAW and GM. The UAW, it looks like, they've gotten pretty much what they wanted in these negotiations. Why? Because there aren't any, it's not like UAW can go find other workers. There's a shortage of them. So I think it's been a positive thing for workers. Let me summarize. If you are an American worker and you are looking for a job and you have some kind of useful skill, this is the best labor market in any of our lifetimes. It's really good. So, well, can it continue? I think it can.
So you mentioned regulation before. How do you figure out where the moments are that you have to use the touch of government? Because as you said, you are for some level of regulation.
So let me put it, the way I like to put it is, look, we all believe in, not all of us, but most of us believe in
Be careful.
Sound regulation that makes the economy run and stops cheaters and things like that.
I have a lot of libertarians that watch this show. They'll be, just by saying the word regulation.
I have friends who don't even believe you should have to drive on the right side of the road. But look, my point is that I believe regulations should be guardrails right on the road, so to keep you on the road. Not. And the left believes that a lot of the regulations should be roadblocks to prevent people from, we want our businesses to succeed, but we want them to stay on the straight and narrow. Too many times, I saw this in the Obama administration, too many times the regulations were just meant to bring these companies to an abrupt stop. And I think that's the difference. We want regulation that makes sense, that's cost effective, and that achieves its mission without disrupting our economy in a way that will destroy jobs.
Can you give me an example of a regulation that Trump has cut? You know, there was the original, wasn't there that idea at one point that if for every new regulation he was going to pass, he was going to cut something like 70 regulations?
He said every new one we'd get rid of 2, and actually so far every new one we've gotten rid of 20. So he's been a big deregulator.
So can you give me an example of where something like that he's cut has actually helped the economy?
Well, the best example is in the energy area. I mean, you know, Barack Obama and his team hated the fossil fuel industry. They hated shale oil and gas. They hated the coal producers. So they passed regulations that were, by the way, the law says that regulations should be passed in a way that where they're achievable for an industry. In other words, that they shouldn't be designed to bankrupt a company.
To take out an
But
industry,
in the area of coal, the intention was precisely to just put the coal producers out of business, and it hurt our oil and gas. Now we've got a situation where we're producing more oil and gas and coal than ever before. We're producing more nuclear power, and that's created, you know, for the first time in our, you know, again, in my lifetime, we're actually producing more oil and gas than we're consuming. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing to think about. We're no longer, you know, susceptible to oil embargoes or, you know, the Russian influence. We saw what happened when the Iranians bombed the oil fields in Saudi Arabia. That was, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. If that had happened before the shale revolution that we have going on, the price of gasoline, well, what are you paying here in California? You pay a lot for gas.
I don't even know what it is. I have an electric car
now,
so I'm not even
sure. But on the East Coast where I live, you know, you pay maybe $3 a gallon. The price of gas probably would have gone to about $6 a gallon if it hadn't been for the fact that the United States is actually now producing a lot of oil and gas ourselves.
So do you think that the primary role of the government basically is to make sure that the economy is running right? Is that really the first thing that the government has to do?
It's to protect our life and our liberty, you know, and the reason we have laws is to, you know, to make sure that I don't violate your rights and you don't violate my rights. And, you know, I'm kind of old-fashioned. I believe if I'm doing something that doesn't, you know, interfere with your rights to life and liberty, that you should be able to do it. I don't like laws that are intended to, for example, protect me from myself. You know, I think adults should be able to do pretty much. I don't like drugs. I don't like tobacco. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. But if you want to do drugs, I think you're stupid to do them.
No comment.
Yeah, but you know, I don't think the government should be involved in those kind of decisions.
Yeah. What else should we know about Trump as someone that has spent some time with him? Like, not even the negotiating part. I mean, he gave us a little insight into just the human part. But it's a little hard to just figure it out through the media. You know?
One of the things that impressed me the most when I wrote the book Trumponomics with my friend Art Laffer, the first few chapters that I'd recommend people read, or just if they're interested in, you know, how Trump operates, is to read those, because we really talk about how Trump, just as a person, what's he like? And he's one of the things that first impressed me when we were called by Corey Lewandowski, who was running the campaign back then, and we'll go down the history books for getting Trump through that Republican nomination. You know, Trump called us in something like January of 2016 and said, you know, Mr. Trump would like to meet you and Larry Kudlow at you know, Trump Tower. And so I was curious about what the Trump movement was just sort of getting going at that point. But you could sense something was going on, and I wanted to see what it was all about. And I say in the book, when I walked in that room, I knew 15 of the other 16 Republicans were running for president. I mean, I know Marco Rubio, I know John Kasich, I knew, you know, Jeb Bush. I'd met them all. The only one I'd never met was Donald Trump. So I was kind of curious. And I say in the book, when I walked in that room, I did not like him. I did not like his persona. I thought he was kind of a blowhard. I thought his run for presidency was a publicity stunt, frankly. And we spent about an hour and 20 minutes with him, and I walked out with stars in my eyes. He's an incredibly charming, charismatic person. And he's always personally been very good to me. You know, he doesn't throw people under the bus that are, you know, loyal to him, and I've tried to, you know, be loyal to, you know, to him, and he's goes both ways. When I went through the Fed Reserve nomination and just got pulverized by, you know, all these accusations against me, you know, I remember I would call Trump up and call the president and say, Mr. President, you know, if this is a problem for you, you know, that, you know, I hate black people and I hate midgets and I hate Jews and I hate, all these allegations. I said, look, if there's a problem, I'm happy to step
You
down.
do realize that that's the clip that people are going to put online.
Yeah, no, but let me be very clear, folks. I don't hate Jews. I don't have blacks. I don't hate midgets. I'm saying that's what, the kind of thing they were saying about me.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I said, Mr. President, that's a problem for you. I don't want to embarrass you. He said get back there, keep fighting. And one thing I do, respect about Trump. And look, Trump has, a lot of things he does and says I don't like at all. I wish he would stop tweeting, for example. But, what I went through was for about 3 or 4 weeks of just getting pulverized in the media. And finally, my wife said, if you stay in this, I'm going to divorce you.
Wow.
Wow. And so I just said, okay, I can't take this anymore. Trump has taken 1,000 times, what I took, and day after day after day after day, and yet he never lets, it just wore me down.
Yeah. How do you think he does that?
I don't. He's like a superhero quality or something in the sense, it's like he's got a coat of armor or something that protects him from from these insults and stuff. He's always called a racist, and that's the other thing I found. I couldn't believe, how many, blacks and minorities he had working for him, and they loved him. And so, he's not a perfect person by any means. He's got a lot of faults, but I think the one thing you always ask me, what drives him? And it really is, how do we make America great again? And how do we make sure that the economy is working for middle class, blue collar workers? Because those are the people who elected Trump. Those were the people in Erie, Pennsylvania, and Lansing, Michigan, and Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and Charleston, West Virginia, who, frankly, were pissed off at both parties, the Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
They didn't like the Bush years, they didn't like the Obama years, and Trump knows the people who brought him to this dance.
Do you think there's any risk in having a sort of pure businessman as the chief executive?
I think it's a breath of fresh air. I think that's the reason he won. I think people were sick of politicians. Remember, what was his closing argument in the election? Do you remember the campaign?
Well, there were a couple things. One of them was, what do you have to lose?
Yeah, that one was
one of the big ones.
Yeah, the other one was drain the swamp.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, that really appealed to people around the country because Washington, this is one of my little pet peeves, and Trump tapped into this. Washington is getting rich at the expense of the rest of us. 3 of the 5 wealthiest counties in the United States are in and around Washington. Mm-hmm. Did you know that?
Yeah.
3 of the 5. How did we do that? I've lived in Washington for 30 years. We don't produce anything. Yeah. All we produce is laws, lawyers, politicians, rules, regulations, and we're getting rich at the expense of the rest of the country. And you know what? The American people finally caught on. It's like, wait a minute. We're sending all our money to Washington. We send them, $1 trillion, they send us $900 billion back, and they keep the rest of the money. And I think that's something that I really admire about Trump. He is trying to drain the swamp, but boy, is that tough to do.
Yeah. So some of the principles you laid out here strike me as a lot of common sense stuff, and I definitely fall in line with that. When you now hear the ideas of socialism being thrown around as if this is the right set of ideas, or when you listen to, say, Bernie or Elizabeth Warren, and the amount of government involvement they want to use to create their, perfect utopian society. Are you shocked that these ideas gain traction?
I am.
Yeah.
I don't think shock would be the term I'd use. I'm distressed. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have been friends with Milton Friedman, who was maybe, the greatest economist of the last 200 years, at least since Adam Smith. And, he was just a wise man in so many things. And
I was on the front page of the New York Times in a compilation with him as some of the leaders of the far right. That's how bananas the media is. So,
cool.
So I'm sympathetic to your wife's situation.
An amazing guy. And I remember towards the end of his life, which was around the turn of the century. He died in the early 2000s. He said to me, and it was kind of in despair, he said, Steve, what is the most enduring lesson of the 20th century? And, I think we both agreed, I think most people agree, the enduring lesson of the 20th century is that communism, socialism, Nazism, Maoism, Bernie Sandersism, whatever you want to call these things, these government controls of the economy, they're a failure. And free enterprise system is a success. That's what everybody should have learned over the last 100 years. It's how the United States of America became the most powerful, economically powerful nation in the world. And then he said, but yet the lesson everyone seems to have learned is we need more socialism. It's like, well, how, it is disturbing. I mean, we have so
Do you think that's just lazy
evidence.
thinking? I mean, what do you think that is? Is it a branding of capitalism that's
Yes.
wrong? Have we grown fat on all of the excesses
Yes.
because it's so
I think
freaking
both
great?
of those things. You make two great points. Number one, capitalism. I don't really use the term capitalism anymore because it's seen as greed, and the rich getting richer. So I think we've lost that term. I talk about free enterprise system, and let people start businesses, let people do what they want to do, let the economy work itself out. The other point you make is I do think we've become fat and happy. And especially the millennials who, you've seen these polls, 52% of college graduates now think that socialism is superior to free market capitalism. I mean, how stupid is that to believe that? And yet that's, part of that is the schools. We've done a horrible job of allowing, the left to take over our government school system, and now we're paying a high price for that. We're turning out kids who don't know anything about anything. Yeah. And so it's a big task we have at hand. But one other thing, I don't even think we should call them socialists. People like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are authoritarians. They're the opposite. You and I, you were saying that you have libertarian tendencies, and I do too. I don't want the government to tell me what to do.
That's it.
They do want the government. They want the government to tell you what kind of straw you can use, what kind of light bulb you can use in your room, what you have to set your thermostat at, what kind of car you can drive,
what kind of school you can go to.
What kind of school. I mean, they want control of everything. And when I talk to young people, I mean, this is my plea. I'm so glad to do the show because I know you've got a great audience. For young people watching the show, freedom and liberty are precious commodities. Most people in the world don't have the freedoms and liberties that you and I have, or the people watching the show. Guard those jealously. I mean, millions of Americans have given up their lives to safeguard those freedoms and liberties. And now we've got a whole generation of kids who's willing to just throw those liberties and freedoms away. I mean, it distresses me.
Well, one of the things that I always find so confusing about it is that the arguments run so thin. So just in the last couple of weeks, AOC was giving a speech on how she didn't want Mark Zuckerberg to be in charge of her health care. Exactly. Now, I get it. I don't really want Mark Zuckerberg to be in charge of my health care. I don't know exactly why she was saying that. But it's like, well, what she wants is Bernie to be in charge of your health care. And it's like, I don't know, who's worse out of those two?
You know who should be in charge of your health care?
You,
exactly. And we should all be, this is the danger. I mean, think about this. The two industries, I talk about this in every speech I give. What two industries in America are most dominated by government?
Healthcare and
education.
And education.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are the two industries we've basically turned over to the government. I mean, look, our healthcare system is 50% private, 50% government.
Right. And now the progressives don't want school choice either, which is completely insane.
So think about this, though. So you got the two industries that are most run by government. Guess which two industries have had the biggest increase in costs over the last 50 years?
I think I'm with you. I think I'm with you here.
Right? You don't have to be a genius here. Yeah. So wait a minute. Then I asked my liberal friends, why do we have the government play such a big role in education healthcare? You know what they say? To make it more affordable. Gee, they're doing a wonderful job of it, aren't they? So why not let every kid, you and I have to start a movement. Every child in America, whether black, brown, or whatever color, whatever income range, wherever they live, it is a disgrace that we're sending millions of kids to failing schools. Why not allow every single American to have the right that Barack Obama had when he moved to Washington, D.C. and moved into public housing, right, in the White House? What did he do? He didn't send his kids to the public schools. He sent them to elite private schools. Yeah. Why can't we let every single American have that same right and have the schools compete for kids? And competition is a wonderful thing.
Well, literally just this morning, we're going to hold this video for a couple of days, but I just saw Elizabeth Warren tweet this morning about how she basically wants to take out charter schools. And it's like,
she did?
Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I just retweeted it this morning.
I mean, it's like they want to force people. This gets to the whole idea you and I were just talking about. Who can make a better decision about what schools their kids should go to? Elizabeth Warren or the parents of those kids? Who do you think cares more about those kids?
What do you think to give the devil his due here? What do you think the root of what these people think is? Okay, we can sit here and agree that their ideas are bad, let's say. But they obviously don't believe that.
I think they have a trust in government.
They just have a fundamental trust in something else.
Well, look, I think there's a sinister answer to that, and then I do think some of them just believe government is good, and all we need is just to spend more money on the public schools. That's all we've been doing for the last 50 years, and they're getting worse, not better. So my attitude is just I don't care what your political philosophy is. If you keep doing something over and over and it doesn't work, you stop doing it, right? Yeah. But the other thing is, let's be honest about this. Who runs the government schools? the teachers' unions do? What is the most powerful? 35% of the delegates in the Democratic Convention are teachers' unions members. They run the Democratic Party. And unfortunately, too many Democrats put the interests of the teachers' unions ahead of the kids though we have the schools that are supposed to be served.
All right, we literally only
No,
have
no,
five.
no,
we
we're
only
just
have
getting
five.
going
No,
here.
I know. We only have 5 minutes left because you got to get to
Next
Fox.
time
It's
I'm
okay.
in LA, can I come back on the show?
You
I'd
can
love to
absolutely
talk
come
to you.
back, and we'll do it with no time limit. But in 5 minutes, this is going to be almost impossible. Can you give me a sort of basic breakdown of where we're at with China? I think this is pretty much the most confusing thing right now. People have no idea what is being ramped up.
So it's
right
not
now.
just confusing. This is the issue of our time.
Okay.
I've called this.
Well, congratulations. I've given you 5 minutes.
Yeah,
on
I know.
it.
It's the epic battle of our time. Just as, from the 1950s through, the late 80s, it was the Cold War with the Soviet Union. Now we have an epic battle between. I think this is the new Cold War. I really do, and I think that this is World War IV. That we've got. I mean, China.
Wait, why did you skip 3 there?
Pardon me?
Why'd you skip World War?
Well,
III?
I think you could say the Cold War was sort of World War III.
Okay.
But in any case, I'm exaggerating a little bit. But what my point I'm making is, China is becoming increasingly a menace on the world scene. They had marched towards freedom. Look, Mao was the single greatest villain maybe who ever walked on the planet Earth. I mean, he killed tens and tens of millions of his own people. And then finally they moved away from communism, which we were talking about before, and they started to embrace privatization and free enterprise, not fully, but they moved in that direction. And yet a boom. I mean, one of the great booms ever in history, what happened in China over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
The problem has been they've moved more in a Stalinistic direction now. And so they're building up their military, they're cheating on trade deals, they've never opened up their markets to us. The way I describe it to Donald Trump, not that he needed any urging on this, because he got this. We are in an abusive trade relationship with China. We've opened up our markets to them. They have not opened up their markets to us. They're stealing our intellectual property. I applaud Trump for finally calling them out on this. It's about time. Where this is right now, the ball's in their court. We have a mini deal right now, but look, you can't trust these people as far as you can spit. I mean, the problem is they also don't keep their word. So it's a tricky situation, but this is a battle that's not going to be resolved in the next 3 months or 6 months or a year or two. It's probably going to go on for a decade or two. And the big issue is, will the United States or China be the world economic superpower over the next 25, 30 years? You know who I'm going to put my money on?
I think you're putting it on the
I'm putting it on
U.S.
us. You know why? Because we still do have a free enterprise system. They are command and control. They have the Elizabeth Warren type of economy.
So you think
it doesn't work?
So you think ultimately that sort of thing might work at some level for some period of time, but ultimately it
fails.
breaks
Show me
down.
any time. I would say to my liberal friends, show me any time, any place, anywhere where that model has worked. It didn't work for the Soviet Union. It hasn't worked for North Korea. It didn't work for Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. It didn't work for Castro. I mean, it's never worked anywhere, because the genius of the free enterprise system is the millions of actors who make decisions. The idea that you can have a few politicians in a central Politburo that can make the decisions about an economy with millions and millions of decisions, I mean, it's ludicrous. It will break down. I'm putting my money on Silicon Valley, and
they've got their own set of problems though because of how lefty they've gone. But that's a whole other topic that we'll have to discuss next time. I think you proved to me you're an economist.
By the way, we have one other big advantage over China.
Yeah.
I always say this in my speeches. Our Chinese are smarter than their Chinese.
I think you proved to me you're an economist here, because we probably got the most amount of ideas packed into the shortest show I've ever done.
Efficiency, my friend.
That is efficiency. There you go. You guys can follow Steve at Stephen Moore on Twitter, and we will have him back for a full episode soon enough. All right, thanks. If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.